afterwards. So Celestine, thank you for that, as always, wonderful introduction. If I can just wait for Celestine to get the there it is. Okay, thanks for that. Apologies for that. Thanks, Celestine and
Awesome.
Colleen.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me today to talk about two of my favorite subjects, women and brains. I'm unashamedly a great fan of women in leadership. Phil, Tom, please forgive me up front for what I'm about to say, but the good part of this is that I've got all the science to back up what I'm about to say. Thank you. As Celestine said, I'm really going to love it if you engage with me. I'm going to try keep a check on the chat, but they will also support me. Put up your hand or put any questions in the chat as we go along. I'm more than happy to engage with you. Obviously, I'll just manage the time as we go along. So you have been sent the agenda of what I'm going to talk about, the outcomes that we're looking for. So I'm going to speak to you, give you some statistics about what is going on currently with women in leadership. And then I'm going to introduce you to the fabulous female brain, give you a little lightning whirlwind tour around the structure and function of your brain. And we'll talk about the differences between female and male neurochemistry. And it talks about something which I call the plastic paradox. And then how do we evidence and defend the need to change the C-suite into the she-suite? Again, Phil and Tom, please forgive me, but I'm going to give you a lot of evidence for this. And I'm going to finish by something which is pretty close to my heart, which is about rewriting the narrative of women in leadership. So I hope you enjoy this tour through your brains and feel empowered and feel inspired to actually take a stand and have each other's backs as we move forward and try to navigate a new world where women are respected and honored, and we allow ourselves to be worth something in the ballroom, as I've called it. Sorry, it's a little bit rude if you go look up the meaning of the word bore, but please forgive me, it just was fun because it rhymed. So just a couple of statistics. Companies that are focused on gender inclusion, that prioritize the advancement of women, reap a variety of benefits, a massive. And sorry, somebody's got a, there we go. They report revenue growth as much as 61% higher than other organizations. 60% report more innovation. I'm going to give you all the science behind female innovation. And 73% say that they are leaders in their industry and customer satisfaction. So just another couple of pieces of statistical information that I don't know if it's interesting or if it's disheartening. Well, it's actually both, I guess. So I'm not going to deeply analyze this graph, but just to point out, the orange is showing how many leaders in each area are women. And did you know that there are 200, if you look right on the right-hand side, there are 200 million healthcare workers in the world, 70% of which are women, and only 50% of whom are paid. Isn't that diabolical? Only 8% of Fortune 500 companies are led by women, only 5% of fintech companies, 1% of CEOs at IPOs, and less than 1% are heads of state. So this is a graph quickly that shows from 1960, just get my pointer, 1960 all the way to 2022, the number of female leaders has, look how massively it's increased, okay? No, I'm joking, 15, which represents less than 1% of female leaders of countries. And we can see what's happening with that. Sorry, I've just frozen. Okay, good. So according to a 2020 analysis, okay, it was found that the pipeline of women in leadership is leaking, women representing just 23% of executives, 29% of senior managers, 37% of managers, 42% professionals, and 47% support staff. So I think these figures kind of speak for themselves. Now, the research shows that there is a scarcity of females in the C-suite, but when there are more women, the research has proven that companies are more successful from a financial perspective. They certainly have more influence on society. Okay, organizations that are led by women tend to have much stronger and more effective humanitarian initiatives that really support the community. People experience less stress in the organization. The communication and collaboration is greater. There's increased productivity, a more engaged workforce, more innovation, and greater customer satisfaction. So hopefully I've given you the evidence that research is showing about why we should be considering more female leaders in the organizations. But now let me introduce you to the female brain, and we'll start to evidence this from a scientific perspective. So, your fabulous female brain. So there are differences between men's brains and women's brains. If you hold up your hands, put your hands together like this, okay? That is approximately the size of your brain in your skull. Now, Phil, if Phil puts up his hand, because I can see your video there, Phil, we can see that men's brains are bigger than women's brains. And men have more brain cells than women do, okay? However, we've got a left side of our brain, we've got a right side of our brain, joined together by something called the corpus callosum, and women have bigger corpus callosums than men do, and I'll tell you what that means in a little while. Okay, so people are quite surprised that this is the size of your brain. You think that this is your brain, but this is your skull. Your skull is there to protect your brain because your brain is remarkably soft. And I'm going to talk more about that when I talk about the plastic paradox. So for now, just if we understand that we have these two sides to the brain, structurally they are almost identical, left side and right side, left and right hemisphere. What I have here in this picture is a cross section through one of the hemispheres of the brain. So I'm going to sound a little bit like a biology teacher for a few minutes. Just forgive me. Hopefully I'll make it engaging and interesting. So we're looking at the important parts of the brain that are relevant to female leadership. I guess it would have been pretty cool if I could have had an hour to talk about the male brain, because there's magnificent things that I've got to say about the male brain as well. And to be honest with you, the differences are not that dramatic. It's more the processing that is pretty different between male and female brains. But for now, I'm going to just focus on the important parts of the brain that are relevant to female leadership. So, your prefrontal cortex is the most important part of your brain. If you put up your hand, right here behind your forehead is where your prefrontal cortex exists. And this part of the brain is to do with rational, reasoning, thinking, conscious behavior. Okay, it's right here behind your forehead. And it's incredibly small in comparison to the rest of your brain. It's about the thickness of the rind of a grapefruit. So that's pretty, it's a pretty small part of your brain. And just remember that it's the only part of your brain that has conscious thinking and reasoning. We then have at the back of your brain here is our visual cortex. This is actually where we see. People think that you see with your eyes, but you don't. Your eyes are merely a mechanism to perceive light and dark and shapes. The information goes into your pupils, through the optic nerve, through your thalamus, and this is where you see. And women have a particularly strong and dense occipital lobe visual cortex. Women are really powerful at thinking in pictures. If you are going to be a powerful leader, an influencer, use pictures, use images, use metaphors, use visuals, because that is what you are good at. And by the way, all brains respond to visuals primarily. Okay, I could talk a lot about that, but let's look at a few other parts of the brain that are important. This limbic system is, so let me just explain, because it's quite important that we understand this. You look at the outer part of the brain there, which has got all these curves and the gyra, the sulca, they're very beautiful, all folded over. The reason that we've got such a folded brain gives us more real estate, so we can pack more into our skulls. An elephant, for example, has got a huge brain, but it's much smoother. Okay, so size doesn't count in this case. The limbic system, those curves on the outer part of the brain, it's called the cortex, okay, which is kind of the outermost bark of the brain, is actually extremely thin. Okay, again, it's about the thickness of the rind of a grapefruit. The whole of the inside of the brain is taken up by your limbic system, which is your instinctive, reactive, survival brain. It takes up a whole lot more space than your thinking, reasoning brain. So I think that you can start to understand why it's so much easier to react rather than to respond. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the limbic system in a little while. I'm sure most of you have heard of a part of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala hangs out basically right between this prefrontal thinking part of your brain and the instinctive, reactive survival brain. It hangs out right between those. And the amygdala is like your sentry, your guard of your brain that decides, should I think and reason and process this with my rational brain, or should I react to whatever is going on? Now, it might interest you that men have got a much bigger, stronger, thicker, denser amygdala than women do. Okay, i.e. reactive. What do we have next? We have the hippocampus, lovely, interesting part of the female brain. All brains obviously have a hippocampus. It's the part to do with long-term memory. Okay, long-term memory. And women, I'm afraid to say, have a thicker, denser hippocampus. So that's why we remember everything. Okay, we can recite word for word what happened in that argument, where we were, what we were wearing, and we leave our poor menfolk bewildered by the capacity of our memory. We've got a part of the brain called the cerebellum, which is right here at the base of your spine. This is the part to do with movement and balance. Not really going to talk too much about that, except to say for a healthy, powerful brain, we need to be exercising. You should be exercising a minimum of 40 minutes, cardiovascular exercise, a minimum of 40 minutes a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Because why? The cerebellum is where new neurons are born. And when it's the part to do with movement and balance, and therefore you need to keep it active in order to grow new neurons, which is what you really want to do right throughout your lifetime, because we're losing neurons, brain cells, all the time. Particularly fun part of the female brain particularly is called the ACC. This is the anterior cingulate cortex. Also kind of hangs out between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. And the ACC is really, it's like your conductor in the orchestra that is processing information and deciding where do I put this information and how do I leverage it. This, I'm afraid, ladies, is bigger in women than it is in men. And it's, when I say it's the conductor, it's deciding what we should do. Basically, it's the worry center of your brain. There's a very well-known writer who talks about it as a hamster wheel, which, because it's larger, in women, we chew and we process information much longer and in much more intensely in order to figure things out. So yes, worry is one of our particular challenges. And then the corpus callosum, which I've mentioned, links left hemisphere and right hemisphere together. As I said, it's bigger in women than men. And what this means is that women can swap between tasks slightly easier than men can. They can leverage left and right hemisphere. However, multitasking is still a myth. Ladies, even though you can swap between tasks slightly easier than our gentlemen friends, multitasking is impossible. So if it's written on your KPI, please take it out. Do not multitask. You become functionally stupid when you are doing 2 tasks at once. And that was my kind of slightly disrespectful way of saying, if you're on your emails now, you're dropping your IQ by about 10 points, which is quite a serious IQ because you're multitasking. Okay, and then another particularly fun part of the brain is called the insula. So you know that part of the brain, or you know that experience when you like smell a disgusting smell, or you taste lemon and you kind of get you get that feeling. This insula is kind of the gut reaction. Unfortunately for us as women, we have a much more powerful and active insula, and the unfortunate part is that it's Velcro for things that are negative and it's Teflon for things that are positive. So therefore we have much stronger reaction and memory for things that are negative towards our gut than positive, but we can also use it to our best advantage. You probably heard of the term grey matter, white matter. Our grey matter is the thinking processing in our brain. The white matter is to do with networking and connections. So men lose their grey matter, their thinking matter quicker. Okay, they become grumpy as they get older. Women lose their white matter quicker, the networks between, and they become forgetful. Okay, so that's a quick whirlwind tour. I'm just going to check in with you. Celestine, there's no questions at the moment. I can see. Anybody got anything they'd like to ask about the structure of the brain before I go into brain function? Any questions for anyone? You can always just put questions in the chat.
Yeah.
We'll get them.
Just a comment from my side, Colleen. I think there's some of the ladies that's also putting this in the chat. But yeah, now I understand why I forget so easily. So thank you for making me feel normal again. Awesome.
But you see, Celestine, this is important because we forget easily. I mean, Celestine, you look about 28. I mean, people say, oh, I'm getting old and I'm getting an age-related brain diseases. But in actual fact, one of the reasons, okay, let me give you an example, Celestine. I get home, okay, and I lose my keys and I can't find my keys anyway. And my teenage daughter raises her eyebrows to the ceiling and goes, Mom, you're getting old. And I say, no, Abigail, I merely have more occupying my neural pathways than you do, and therefore it takes me longer to find my keys. You can borrow that.
I will watch the video again to hear what you said, because I have to fight that battle with my children all the time. But thank you for the compliment. 28 is exactly how old I am.
No, but it's a bit of a myth that we kind of always say, oh, I'm getting old and I don't remember anything. And it's something that I want to get rid of. Yes, there is such a thing as age-related brain diseases. I could talk a lot about how do we facilitate a healthy brain, but I don't have the time now. But more often than not, it's just because firstly, we're worried. Secondly, we're preoccupied with so much stuff. And the worst thing, Celestine, is that we're multitasking all the time. And like I said, when we're multitasking, we become stupid. Okay, so let's avoid the age-related brain diseases there. Okay, thanks. That was great. You can see why I enjoy to engage. Just
a question from Phil, Colleen.
Sure, Phil.
Carl, will you go through it? Because mine and Shelley's story is bringing up a kid who had a traumatic brain injury and who was declared almost deep-vegetative, and we brought up him quite healthy after that. Will you go through neuroplasticity?
Yes. Almost
okay,
now.
fantastic.
Okay,
thank you.
I mean, don't tempt me there, because I can go and talk about. Well, we'll do it some other time, I'm sure, about the capacity of the brain to repair, which in actual fact is remarkable, and we didn't really know that before. Just let me get through this, and then I'll just speak briefly about that. So basically, why I call it sparks in chemistry. So that I've shown you how the brain functions. Now, in your brain, you've got approximately 100 billion brain cells. Okay, Like I said, men have more brain cells than women do, but we don't use them all. And what you can see here in this little GIF is that the brain works off electrical chemical activity. So as a piece of information goes from the one brain cell to the next brain cell to the next brain cell, it's like a little electrical impulse that is passing down the extension of the brain cell towards the extension of the other brain cell. And the brain is awash with neurochemicals. Okay, many more neurochemicals than I've just got written on this slide, but these are the ones that I want to mention particularly today. Now, the neurochemicals facilitate the functioning of our brain. If the neurochemicals are out of balance, these electrical impulses do not work effectively. I'm sure you've all heard of dopamine. Dopamine is your motivation neurochemical. Okay, when dopamine is high, we are motivated to action. Serotonin is your mood neurochemical. Okay, when you're feeling happy, you can engage, you can think, you can work. When you're feeling depressed, you don't think so effectively. So what you're seeing here is, in order for the brain to work, these neurochemicals need to be in balance. The statistic for women is that they have much slower serotonin production, and women suffer from depression 2 times more than males do because of that. Men also have very strong dopamine receptors and respond to excitement and intense experiences more intensely. Oxytocin is our cuddle hormone. They're called hormones in your body, and they're called neurochemicals in your brain. You have them right throughout your entire body. It's the cuddle hormone. So we need to be connected as human beings. We are a tribal species. And when we are in presence, and by the way, this is physical presence. Okay, I can do a whole nother talk on how important it is to go back to work wherever possible, to have connection with other humans, because learning only occurs when oxytocin is present, in the physical presence of other human beings. Adrenaline, I'm sure you've all heard of. Adrenaline is your reactive, your fight, flight, freeze neurochemical. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. Cortisol is your stress neurochemical. And then we have estrogen, progesterone, vasopressin, and testosterone. So most of you are probably used to hearing about it in the context of your body as hormones. But just remember, these are very important neurochemicals as well. Obviously, well, not obviously, women and men have all of these neurochemicals. Okay, all of us have all of them. But women have more estrogen and progesterone, and men have more vasopressin and testosterone. But we all have all of them. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the impacts of the differences of those neurohormones are. So let me go quickly, because I see there's other votes of confidence for talking about neuroplasticity. So remember, this is like my bucket list dream, is to hold a real brain in my hands. Unfortunately, that's not a real one. I know that's a bit creepy, but anyway. So remember I said, if your brain is about that big, the size of your fists, and your skull is there to protect your brain, because your brain is remarkably soft. I'm not sure if you can see my video. We have a little brain here. Okay, this is obviously smaller than a normal brain. So this is about how soft your brain is. Okay, if you had a brain in your hands, a real brain, you could actually do this with a brain. So this is maybe a little creepy, but it's also really good news, because Phil, this is exactly what you're talking about. This brain has the capacity to change right throughout your lifetime. And Phil, the younger a person is when they have a brain injury, or when they are taught any particular skill, the younger they are, the more plastic the brain is. However, it's important to also understand that the brain remains plastic right throughout your lifetime. I've got a client who's 80 years old. She is the most remarkable woman, absolutely incredible. She came to me depressed, anxious, worried, fearful, and we started working together. I'm a coach, I'm an executive coach, worked with her, and she just transformed her life. She's an inspiration. My 82-year-old mother, who I love and adore, is depressed, anxious, reactive. And I say to her, Mom, let me teach you this stuff. I teach it for a living. And she says, no, this is the way I am. So the key message I'm giving here is you have got the capacity to leverage the plasticity of your brain right throughout your lifetime, even into your 80s, but you have to want to. If you don't want to change, you're not going to change. What I'm talking about here, so I could talk for ages about neuroplasticity, because and Phil, there is some, I can give you some absolutely wonderful literature that shows how rehabilitation is engaged in so differently these days to the way it was 30, 40 years ago, where they didn't know that people could change as dramatically. And there's been profound healing that has occurred for people with brain injury. It's very, very interesting. There's a great book called The Brain That Changes Itself. It's a wonderful book about what is happening in terms of the field of neuroplasticity and therapeutic interventions.
Cole, it's very interesting you're talking about this. You'll remember, but I went through your coaching course some years ago, and as a result of my son's brain injuries and the recovery that Shelley and I went on for nearly a 3-year period, I actually wrote a book on this as well. And the speaker that we're hoping to get next month will follow on from this amazing work that you're doing. Someone called Adelaide Goodeve, and she has suffered her whole life with ME. And no surgeons or neurologists in the UK have been able to assist her. And she's had debilitating ME. And she went on a course similar to your courses, and she has self-healed through the power of brain and thinking, and through nutrition and nutraceuticals, and cleared out all the beta amyloid plaque and all the stuff in the brain that causes dementia. And she's changed her diet. So not to take any of your thunder, this is such a brilliant continuity, and your audience are loving this. So fantastic. Thank you.
Good. I can't see any questions, so guys, you can put in comments or questions as we go along. No, the capacity of the brain to change is profound, and the capacity of the brain to heal the body is profound as well. But I think we must always be very careful with this, because people come and say, I cured myself of cancer, and then what about the poor person who didn't? It's not a given that by using your mind you can heal your body, but there's so much power in leveraging neuroplasticity to heal and to change our brains. But there's also danger, and this is why I'm talking about the plastic paradox. So what is the paradox? The beauty of, remember, whichever part of your brain you're using becomes stronger, thicker, and denser, okay? So you using your visual cortex, an artist will have a very strong, thick, dense visual cortex. A piano player has got a very strong and thick connection between left and right hemisphere because of the nature of crossing over the midline when they're playing the piano. Whichever part of your brain you're using gets stronger, thicker, and denser. If you are using your brain to whine and complain, that's what's growing stronger, thicker, and denser. If you're using your brain to be wise, to think, to be motivated, to be self-disciplined, that's what you're growing in your brain. So it's magnificent, it's beautiful, but the paradox in terms of the female brain or the female experience is that we train our brains to be weaker. We train our brains that I should be nurturing everybody and I shouldn't be a dynamic businesswoman. We're training ourselves to think and to create brains that fulfill this cycle of gender, fulfill the conditioned narratives that we have about women. Now, please understand that I love being a woman. I love women. I think being a female is a magnificent thing, but I think we sabotage ourselves because of conditioned narratives. So caveman Sally and cavewoman Sally and caveman Sam, essentially this brain that we carry around in our skull, it's kind of was designed to keep us alive as a tribe. So the male brain is built more dramatically to chase, okay, to hunt, to gather, to protect. They have stronger muscles, they have more energy, they have more testosterone, which is a dominant neurochemical. Females were, so if males' brains were designed to chase, women's brains were designed to choose, okay, to give birth, to nurture, to look after the hearth, So social skills and bonding are particularly important because we all have roles. And that's why I think we should embrace femaleness and female roles. We should embrace maleness and male roles. We're not trying to make women men, okay? And I'm not trying to get into any kind of woke debate here. And we're not trying to make men into women. But we're saying, how do we leverage off the magnificence of both male and female brains? So remember, though, when we lived in the savannah, the longest life expectancy was 25 years old. Okay, have we factored in what is now different, living to 30 like Celestine, 28 Celestine, or 40 or 50 or 60, and the changes that we can create as we grow older and our hormones change and our the requirements of our social tribe actually shift. I feel like I should be on a pulpit here, but I'll get off it pretty quickly. So really what this diagram is showing here is that we have this tiny prefrontal cortex. Remember, it's behind your forehead, the thinking, rational, reasoning brain. And everything in the world is inputted into our prefrontal cortex, passes through our prefrontal cortex in order to embed information into our subconscious and unconscious brain. So in other words, when you learn how to drive a car, you have to think about it. You're processing, you're using this prefrontal cortex, changing gears, pushing in the clutch, and it takes a lot of energy and effort. So what this beautiful brain is designed to do is to hardwire these actions into our subconscious and unconscious brain, so that we can free up more space in our prefrontal cortex to learn other things. Can you imagine having to think about how to drive every time you got in a car? So this is a fabulous, fabulous process. We hardwire everything. You hardwire the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you think, the way your self-talk. We hardwire this into our brains. This is the conditioned narrative that I'm talking about. You are taught as nice girls look after baby dolls and good boys don't cry. And we taught all of these misconceptions and these narratives that actually become part of our subconscious and unconscious processing, but they're not always true. They just become part of that conditioned belief system that we have. And now the problem is that whatever we hardwire in our brain, in our subconscious, unconscious, rises like scum to the surface and becomes part of our consciousness. So when I'm saying women can't be leaders, or when I'm saying I shouldn't be dominant, or no man's going to like me because I'm authoritative, those thoughts, those narratives are going to rise to the surface and it's going to become my reality. And then that is how I'm going to perceive the world. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Okay, there's no such thing as reality, only your perception of reality. And unfortunately, I think that our perception of reality has been born of thousands of years of conditioning, and we haven't leveraged the possibilities of probably certainly I don't think any of us have come close to actualizing what our brains are really capable of. So just another kind of part of this self-fulfilling cycle is that the stereotypes that we're engaging with, that we're living with, is that men take charge, they are strong, decisive, and assertive, and women take care. They are a nurturing, emotional, communicative. Like I said, we have got neurochemicals that make women more nurturing, that make men protective and dominant. But what we've created out of this stereotype is the double bind, where when women take charge, and the statistics are pretty scary here, when women take charge, they're viewed as competent leaders, but they're disliked. And when women take care, they are liked, but they're viewed as less competent leaders. So how do we navigate between these two, that we can take charge and take care? And how do we change perceptions? How do we change these gender stereotypes and gender biases that actually hold us back from what we could possibly give to the boardroom? And I'm just using the boardroom as a kind of, to leadership, to business, to our families, to the world, in actual fact, I should be saying rather. So Morag has asked, what's the difference between subconscious and unconscious mind processing? Morag, have you got another 4 hours? And I'll start to describe that. So I think just my diagram here, what I'm trying to show is that conscious processing happens when we're aware, okay, and present with whatever is happening. Now, remember, a lot of stuff is happening around me. There's thousands of pieces of information being put in, occurring in my environment at all times, but I can't take in all that information. So my conscious awareness will deliberately focus on specific things that draw my attention. That is prefrontal cortex. And then what I'll do is put as much as possible through practice, through rehearsal into my subconscious and unconscious processing. So I don't have to think, you don't have to think, lift leg, move leg forward, put leg down when I'm walking. You don't have to think about brushing your teeth. But once upon a time you did. Now you've hardwired it into automatic processing. And I'm using very generalist terms. We could get into details, but I haven't got the time for that now. Okay, so let's talk about getting the females to optimize who they are, to optimize their neurology, their neurochemistry, and to be the best version of themselves in, like I said, the world, the boardroom, the family, wherever. So these are the particular characteristics that women have that are their superpower. Okay, check, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 superpowers here. Collaboration and communication. I put these together because there's quite a blend in terms of the neurochemistry around it. Creativity and competence, constructive conflict, compassion and emotions, coherence, courage and commitment, and then finally, my favorite, intuition. So I'm going to just briefly go through each one at a time. Before I do that, I'm just having a look at the chat. Morag saying, my motorbike training, I find women have more inner dialogue than men. Any scientific reasoning? Remember the ACC, that worry part of the brain. And the ACC is also particularly connected to the insula. So what women do, and so the difference between men and women is women use an average of 8,000 words per day. Men use an average of 4,000 words per day. Women use an average of 10,000 gestures per day. Men use an average of 3,000 gestures per day. Okay, and we've got this incredibly large anterior cingular cortex. So what women are doing is self-talk, 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 self-talk all day. The language is not always out there. I'm sure I could give you other reasons, Morag, as well. And Mary is saying, is the self-fulfilling cycle the reason why your initial stats will show so few? That's what I believe. Okay, it's part of my theory. I think that the self-fulfilling cycle, the gender stereotypes, are preventing us from really optimizing both the benefits and the power of the female brain as well as the male brain. In actual fact, who's going to win the British Prime Minister's race? Don't ask me that. I will tell you in 3 months' time when I move to the UK. Okay, so let's talk about each one at a time. In terms of collaboration and communication, as I said before, that we can't multitask, and I'm just multitasking because my son has arrived home and I've let him in. In terms of collaboration and communication, women have more oxytocin than men do. Okay, women also have more estrogen and progesterone than men do. And so what a female is naturally more sensitive to atmosphere. A female is also naturally inclined to collaborate. In fact, there's some fabulous research that says the simplest and easiest way to raise the IQ of a team, okay, any team, is merely add a woman, because women tend to gather more people's opinions, whereas men have testosterone, which is a dominance neurochemical, and a man will tend to dominate the team. But please remember, I'm really talking generically here, so please don't shoot me for the bold statements. I'm talking in tendencies. Okay. Communication, I've spoken about the kind of words women use, and just males, because of the kind of the neurological and tribal conditioning is that their need is more to dominate, their need is more to lead, or to be alone. Okay, it's not, then they don't, men actually suffer, and I'm talking research, okay, men suffer much more when relationships break up because they don't have the extensive network that a female does. A female collaborates, that tribal drive to collaborate with more people, to create a nurturing group. So it's much more important biologically for a woman to collaborate, but this can serve us in the boardroom, okay, because we will get the best out of more people and we will communicate as opposed to limit the amount of information that we give. I know sometimes it feels like we give too much information. I'm just going to carry on because I've got a few more, and then I'm going to look at the chat. But Celestine, please do stop me if you feel something's important that I should address immediately. In terms of creativity and competence, so this, I said to you, I talked to you a little bit about creativity. So remember, I said the women have a bigger hippocampuses, which is long-term memory, and women remember everything. Now, the interesting thing about creativity is when, creativity is putting new ideas together, coming up with novel, innovative connections in your brain. Now, the interesting thing about creativity is creativity emerges most powerfully when there is stored knowledge. So, like Einstein coming up with the theory of relativity, or Newton and the apple falling on the head, these moments of insight and brilliance are not random. For somebody who hasn't studied mathematics and doesn't understand the functioning of the universe, they're not going to suddenly randomly come up with a theory. It's because of their stored knowledge that they are able to have these insights. And remember, women have bigger hippocampuses. They also use the past to make more decisions. They also are more connected to their emotions in terms of decision making, and creativity is very strongly connected to emotional processing. So women have great capacity for being creative if they allow themselves to have the courage and commitment to show up as being creative. And in terms of competence, females, remember that, again, that bigger ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, it's kind of, you got the ACC, you got the insula. It's like the compare and despair. So we will process what is negative. We will analyze, be more deeply analytical, and pay more attention to detail. Okay, males tend to be, again, please, I'm using the word tend, to be more impulsive and determined and dominant in a way as well. In terms of conflict, okay, is that essentially what I call it the saber-toothed tiger in the boardroom. The saber-toothed tiger in the boardroom is not a male, okay? The saber-toothed tiger in the boardroom are all the threats that we are facing. And by the way, we don't necessarily need to call it in the boardroom. In life, in general, we are experiencing many, many, many threats consistently, and never before, in my opinion, than in the last 2-3 years. COVID-19 is a saber-toothed tiger. Russia and the Ukraine is a saber-toothed tiger. Brexit is a saber-toothed tiger. Our political system in South Africa is a saber-toothed tiger. Am I going to get sick or not is a saber-toothed tiger. Is my job safe is a saber-toothed tiger. The fact that there's a glass ceiling for women in the organization is a saber-toothed tiger. So we are facing these saber-toothed tigers all the time. And what happens whenever we experience a threat? Okay, now this threat, like I said, it could be somebody treating you unfairly. It could be being left out of the meeting. It could be being told that you're incompetent. And it could be losing a loved one. Okay, we are facing these threats all the time. And what happens when we face a threat? We have a response, which is, I call the fight, flight, freeze, faint, flock, please response. When the saber-toothed tiger jumps out in front of me, either I fight the saber-toothed tiger, or I run for the hills, or I freeze and I hope the saber-toothed tiger notices Phil down the road rather than me. Sometimes people faint, and that's almost like blanking out. You know, in that you're in a meeting and suddenly there's this threatening experience, and it's like you blank out. That is a threat response. The flock response is people gathered together. You know how you scream for help? Okay, that's a flock response. It's a survival response to threat. And then the please response is you trying to, you know, I'm not going to placate the saber-toothed tiger, but certainly the guy with a gun to my head. I might say, what else do you want? You can have my cell phone. In fact, I had a client the other day. She's driving down William Nicol Drive. Guy appears at her window with a gun to her head, says, give me your phone. She hands him her phone, and then she says, hold on a second, I've got another phone in the cubbyhole. And she goes and gives him the other phone. That's a please survival response. Now, here's the deal. Men have a dominant fight and flight response. Okay, that is, I've had fight responses and flight responses as well. Women tend to freeze, faint, flock, and please. That is our neurochemistry has a tendency towards those responses. And by the way, there is another F in the male circle, but I'm not allowed to say that in polite company. So,
Colleen, I want to mention that my wife is probably the anomaly in there. When she was attempted to be hijacked and they were trying to drag her through the window of her BMW, she attacked the attackers with her car. Wow. And got away. So women also have a very strong fight impulse. Absolutely.
And you better believe that a woman who's got her baby with her is going to fight. Okay. So please don't, I'm being a little generic here. We all have all of these responses. I'm a trauma counselor. I counsel victims of violent crime in Johannesburg. I've got a client who is a bodybuilder, strong, tattooed, muscled guy. And he says to me, Colleen, I don't know why, I just stood there and I let them take everything and all my friends' possessions and whatever. I said, dude, they had a gun to your head. The best thing that you could do was freeze. In that case with Shelly, she was obviously in threat for her life. The best thing she could do is fight. So we will always do the best thing for our survival. Okay, I'm saying that we have a tendency. Why? Because the man has to protect the cave, the woman has to protect the family. So there would be a tendency, but we will do always, men and women, we will always do the best thing for our survival, our own survival, our own personal survival, except in one case, if our child is present. If a loved one is present, then we will do the best one for their survival. And you will see men putting their own lives in danger for females because they are driven through the testosterone for dominance. And then remember, men also have more vasopressin, and vasopressin is a territorial neurochemical. So there's that protectiveness of their space, and we could talk about that quite extensively as well. Okay, so I've just got another couple of slides. Remember, women have a tendency to have more compassion. Be careful of this, ladies, because a lot of people mistake empathy for compassion. Empathy is exhausting. And because we are driven to nurture, because we're driven to care for a tribe, we can overplay empathy and that we get empathy burnout. Compassion is much more powerful. Compassion is a process where we can really support, connect with other people, care for other people, but allow people to navigate their own journey, not being the rescuer, not having to help, not always having to fix. Empathy fixes and rescues, compassion empowers. Women have this amazing capacity to empower other people. And I could do another 3-day talk on compassion. In fact, I do a lot of speaking about compassion. So just remember that because of the differences in the size of the amygdala and also our neurochemistry, when we are under experiencing threat, men have as quick a reaction to anger and threat, but men will tend to avoid emotion connected to that, and women will tend to avoid anger connected to that. Okay, so last one, what are we talking about? The last C, which is coherence, courage, and commitment. Women have more resilience physiologically. They're the ones who have babies. I adopted mine. I think you're insane to go and do that twice. is crazy, but women do, okay, and women are known to be able to tolerate higher levels of pain than a lot of men do. Also, women have more progesterone, and the progesterone is your calmness neurochemical, so allows you to stay calm within dangerous and difficult circumstances. I love this quote by Ginny Rometty. I learned to always take on things I've never done before. Growth and comfort do not coexist. I made a commitment to myself when I turned 40. I said, I had a very different life before I turned 40, very, very different. I'll maybe tell you about it if I have a chance. But I said to myself, I will never say no to anything that scares me ever again. And boy, oh boy, has it been a bumper ride since. But that's also where I've discovered my success, when I owned my courage and I owned my commitments. And there was a reason why I did it. Sorry, I'm going off track a little bit here. It was because I experienced a threat. And what was the threat, Phil, is that I discovered that my son was brain damaged. And I realized I had to change my life. I had no confidence, no self-worth. I would never have spoken in front of 2 people, never mind a couple of hundred. Now I've done TED Talks. I travel the world teaching people about neuroscience. And my entire life change came after the age of 40. Before that, I was a beautician painting people's nails. So I truly live and walk the walk of neuroplasticity in that way. And then again, I've spoken quite
Colleen,
a bit.
Sorry,
Yeah.
on that, I've just put a post in there that you are a TEDx presenter. Your story is one that is just at a different level. Would you mind at a later stage, or maybe in the app, just sharing your TEDx talk?
Sure.
That is just it is such a life-changing talk for everybody that needs to really understand the power of what you have been through and that you walk the talk. If you wouldn't mind, that would be really good.
Thanks, Phil. No, that's a pleasure. But you can also just put my name in YouTube, Colleen Lightbody. I've got quite a few videos there. My TED Talk was called Warrior to Warrior, and that was my transformation. I was such a warrior and had no control over this, my cerebral cortex, let alone my subconscious and unconscious brain. And then I only discovered neuroscience at the age of 40, and it profoundly changed my life. Intuition, I've spoken a lot about. That we have, women have stronger insulas and therefore stronger gut reactions. Women are also allowed to trust their intuition more than men do. Men tend to be more analytical and feel that they have to defend what it is that they do and why they do it, whereas women are more sort of allowed to, almost in our communities, to be more intuitive. So I had a quick few points about that again, I'm going to sound a bit like I'm on a pulpit here, but ladies, I think we need to have each other's backs. We need to make sure that we rewrite this narrative of females in leadership. We need to intentionally foster the development of female employees, of each other, and support each other. There's too much competitiveness in the boardroom because we feel like we're fighting against each other, but in actual fact, we aren't fighting. We shouldn't be fighting against each other. We should be supporting each other. We need to tie gender diversity to executive compensation. There needs to be equality. We need to create programs that give women exposure to leadership and problem solving, okay, as opposed to 50% of healthcare workers are unpaid because they will do it. Executive learning and mentoring tracks. Phil, Shelley, my deepest respect for what you are crafting here. This is what is needed in female leadership. Flexible working arrangements for new working mothers, end-to-end maternity support, female executive chat forums. I think your app is going to really support that. We need to self-promote. Trust yourself, believe in yourself, and be a woman. Be the female, the powerful female that you can be. And make men your allies. Make them part of the solution. I can do the man's brain talk as powerfully as I can do this one as well, but this one touches my heart maybe a little more. And then leverage those strengths, the 5 C's and the intuition. You have the capacity. Serena Williams says, the success of every woman should be the inspiration to another. We should raise each other up. Make sure you're very courageous, be strong, be kind, extremely kind, and above all, be humble. Thank you, everyone. I'm happy to come to questions now. If you send me an email or just go onto my website, brainwise.co.za, then I will post the slides I'll post the PDF of the slides, but maybe I'll give it to you as well, Phil. You can get a discount code for any courses or coaching you do with me. And I've got an article that I've written of the neuroscience of female leadership. So thank you very much. That's me. Would anyone, or Celestine, I'm going to let you direct this. Do you want to? I haven't been watching the chat.
So there has been a couple of questions that came through, mostly comments. I want to ask Linda. You shared some stats, and Linda posed a question to ask: would that stats be similar in the transgender community? Which I think is quite an interesting question. Linda, I'm not sure if you want to just come on mic and ask Colleen about that.
I'm seeing her question. Linda,
I was just curious if it's something that is gene related, because with transgender women, I don't know if the behaviors also play a part and then would render the stats different or similar.
Linda, it's such a good question. I think I'd have to do a lot of research, so I cannot answer with authority at all. I've done a lot of work in the transgender community, because how do you, as when you're changing gender, how do you actually shift against these narratives that are in our society around who you're supposed to be and who you should be? And there's a lot of anxiety and pain connected to that. Stats-wise, can't answer that, but it's a very interesting question. Thanks for raising it.
Awesome. Thanks, Colleen. I also want to raise Laurie's question. Laurie asked, how does a woman having a hysterectomy factor into her neural processes or processing, and how do you remedy or minimize the effects?
Okay, again, it's quite specific, and I'm certainly not a medical doctor by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just an academic thinker. But in terms of hysterectomies, in terms of menopause, women have more dramatic hormonal and neurochemical changes than a male does, and therefore there is a lot more variability. And clearly, when you're going to go through menopause, when you're going to have a hysterectomy, it's going to shift your neurochemistry as well. So I can't speak with authority on the changes that will happen, but make no mistake, it will be an aspect of shifting brain function.
Awesome. I think there's just another question that I also want to pose. It says, if our brain is elastic and our tendencies can hardwire our brain, how does how we are nurtured affect us? Are women raised predominantly by males more drawn to leadership and being dominant than those that are not, I think?
Sure, that's such a great question. But how we are raised, you better believe it affects us. And I mean, I can work with 50, 60, 70-year-old senior executives that have got very primal belief systems that sabotage themselves because of conditioned experiences in their childhood, particularly in apartheid South Africa, what people had to live through. And okay, I won't get started on that, but even parenting, schooling systems, societal gender biases, all of these really craft our belief systems and our identity. Celestine, sorry, I can't see the actual question there. They craft who we become in the world, but it's not the reality. The reality is we've got plasticity. We can become, yes, we have certain tendencies to certain temperament, certain abilities, but those are tendencies. We have got the capacity to change those beliefs, to shift our identity. I did it after the age of 40, so it's never too late. I kind of lost the question there.
Thanks, Colleen. There's a question from Morag also. That's the last question. It says, going back to inner dialogue, if we create our own narrative with the inner voice, which say I can't, how do we actually manage that inner voice and redirect it to I can? I think it also talks to that plasticity that you're talking about. So how do we change our own internal narrative around that?
Self-talk. And Morag, don't underestimate the power of self-talk. I mean, what you say is what you become. So if I say I'm useless, I become useless. Okay, so it's a top-down and a bottom-up approach. The top-down approach is to do affirmations, visualizations, mantras. Watch yourself talk, guys, because we unconsciously are automatic. There I go again. Oh, I'm so stupid. I catch myself doing it, but hopefully I'm conscious to catch myself doing it, and then you shift it. Okay, so that's the top-down approach. Then a bottom-up approach, I believe, is therapeutic, coaching, therapy. Go and find out what are the conditioned narratives that are sabotaging you, that are limiting you from your potential. Go and get professional support. Speak to other women. Have open conversations where we can talk about. And by the way, don't go blame your parents. Don't go home after this talk and say to your parents, "You see what you've done to me," because your parents had parents, right? And for some reason, we haven't had these conversations in the world where we actually talk about how do we create stories? How do we create a society that allows a person to actualize and optimize who they are, despite where they're born, what color their skin is, what their gender is, etc.
Colleen, there's also a question from Derek, and one of the participants is just taking it back there to say, how do men and women create better relationships in the working environment?
Okay, yeah, that's a huge question, but how do we? I believe by acknowledging our differences and leveraging them. Instead, it's not one is better than the other, or we're not really different. I know I've been pointing out differences all day, but we all have power. We've got our superpowers. So why don't we actualize those superpowers in unity, as opposed to being divisive and in either or kind of environments. Philip, I think this might have to be my sort of almost last question, because I have something on it.
Okay, we can wrap up. I'll let Celestine wrap up. I just wanted to mention something.
You've gone on mute, Philip?
Well, you mute yourself there by accident.
Sorry, something I just want to mention quickly, and then Celestine can wrap up. Something that I learned from you was the importance of using useful techniques. Something you taught us, which was the SCARF model, Dr. David Rock, and the Neuro Leadership Institute, etc. And it's actually, just for all the people that are in here, it's in the app. The SCARF model is in the app with recognition to Dr. David Rock.
Yeah.
It is an exceptional model for using, for improving collaboration and cooperation and communication, and it's specifically between male, female, and in stressful engineering and construction environments. So it's just something to do. But so we can continue this. Well, Carl, we're going to have to get you back. I can see that for sure.
Yeah.
Shelley's got a hand up, and then Celestine, will you wrap up then? Thank you.
I just wanted to say, while this is still fresh in your minds, please go and share the most insightful learning from today. There's great richness in getting this discussion going and doing it while you are still immersed in the thinking of what Colleen has shared today. And Colleen, I'd like to thank you so much for your time. I know you are an extremely busy, popular, and in-demand speaker. So we have been so extremely privileged to have you and for you to consent to join our program. And I'm immensely grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Colleen. On that note, I will cut and paste what Shelley said. So everything. I also just wanted, there is still some questions. I am going to ask you if you can post that questions in the app. Colleen will have access to it, and she can respond there. Colleen, thank you so much for your time. It has been phenomenal. And hopefully we will be able to bring you back sometime to talk about those techniques. I think it is quite important. It's been hugely valuable. So thank you very much. Thanks everybody for attending. Don't forget our app onboarding sessions that we've got next week, and we will send out invites. Thank you very much. It's been